They told me I'd make 200 grand for a week's work. No meetings, no deadlines, just drive into the desert, set up a few instruments, and record the weather. But there's no weather like this on Earth. The lightning here doesn't fade, it remembers. And the wind doesn't blow, it listens. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the first totem on the roadside. Bones tied with cloth, faces carved into driftwood, all staring toward the horizon like they were watching the sky. By the time I reached the village, half the houses were empty, the rest sealed shut. The people only came out around noon, and when I asked why, one of them looked me dead in the eye and said, "Because the night is when the storm remembers names." Before it all fell apart, I had a name that meant something. Mark Ellison, meteorologist, a specialist in storm behavior, once called the man who could read the sky. Then, one night on a live stream, I said the wrong thing, that a storm system off the Atlantic was moving against prevailing winds like it was guided. I lost my job, my credibility, and my reputation in a single broadcast. For months I sat in a one-room apartment, watching satellite feeds for free, surviving on instant noodles and self-pity. Then an email arrived that didn't belong in my inbox. From Aeolus Analytics. Subject: short-term contract offer. Details: 7-day assignment. Atmospheric data collection. Morocco. $200,000. Equipment provided. Travel covered. There was no sender name, no phone number, just forms and a ticket already booked in my name. The NDA was unusually strict. 5 years of silence. Forfeiture of payment if verbal or written dissemination of sensory phenomena occurred. The liability waiver listed acts of God, electromagnetic events, and unclassified atmospheric activity. It sounded like a joke, but the money wasn't. I signed. 2 days later, I landed in Casablanca. A silent driver met me with a sign, drove me to an industrial complex on the city's edge, and handed me the keys to my new command center, a modified white van bristling with sensors, solar panels, and antennas like a steel porcupine. Inside was a workstation, racks of instruments, and a printed folder labeled Field Advisories. The first page contained the usual setup instructions. The second stopped me cold. Do not operate exterior equipment after dusk. Do not leave vehicle during nocturnal activity. If you encounter boundary markers, do not disturb them. Mirrors may reduce line of sight interference. Do not speak your full name aloud in open air after dusk. I reread that last line twice. Do not speak your full name aloud. The scientist in me laughed. The man who needed the money didn't. By dawn I was driving east, the city shrinking behind me into dust. Civilization gave up quickly, replaced by a horizon that never stopped moving. The van purred like a creature that trusted its purpose. Hours passed. The GPS wavered. Then I saw the first one, a totem standing beside the road. Wooden branches lashed together, decorated with small bones, feathers, and a mirror shard glinting in the heat. 50 yards later came another, then another, each facing the same direction, west, toward the horizon. I stopped and logged the coordinates. The air shimmered. The barometer flickered, not much, but enough to make me glance twice. Then, a few miles later, I saw others, broken ones, split down the center, scorched, their mirrors shattered. By sunset, the sky burned orange and bruised violet. I parked and decided to record one last set of readings before dark. The desert was silent except for the wind brushing the van's sides. When I turned the radio on to check transmission strength, it came through fine, clear static. Then the noise shifted. The static began to pulse, as if something was breathing through it. A single word formed under the hiss, faint but deliberate. My name. Mark. The hair on my arms stood up. I shut the radio off and sat very still. Maybe the wind was playing tricks on the frequency. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, I didn't sleep much that night. Morning came too bright, too quiet. The road vanished into the dunes and my GPS refused to cooperate. After an hour of second-guessing every turn, I spotted a cluster of mud brick roofs on the horizon. The village of Haroud, the place Aeolus had marked as Area Theta. The settlement was half buried in sand. Wooden doors were braced from the inside. Curtains hung motionless over dark windows. No smoke, no voices. I thought it abandoned until a single door creaked open around noon. That was when the people emerged. Not many of them, maybe a dozen in total. They blinked in the light like moles from the dark. A man in a worn blue robe approached with two others. "You are the weatherman?" he asked, accent thick but careful. I nodded. "Just collecting data." "Mark." He frowned. "Then you should hurry, Mark. The wind here does not forget." His name was Youssef, his sister Amina, and their uncle Hassan, who said little but watched everything. They led me through the narrow streets where the buildings leaned together like conspirators. Every doorway was outlined with shards of mirror nailed into the plaster, every window covered with dark cloth. Even the chimes that hung from porches were tied still so they couldn't move. "Why the mirrors?" I asked. Amina touched one gently. "They confuse what watches. When the sky moves wrong, it forgets where to look." Youssef told me that at night, they sealed themselves underground. "We work when the sun is high. The rest of the time, the air listens." At the edge of the village stood a broken totem like the ones I'd seen along the road. Its twin beside it remained intact. Youssef's tone hardened. "Men came before you. They broke them, scientists, like you say. They said our stories were only dust. After that, the Watchers came closer." "What are the Watchers?" I asked. "The wind," he said simply. "The storm that remembers. If you speak your name, it keeps it." Back in the van, I logged the readings. Even in daylight, the EMF sensors twitched, and the VLF receiver hummed faintly like a throat clearing before speech. My instruments behaved as if something just outside the village was moving but unseen. By late afternoon, the villagers retreated indoors again. Amina stopped at my door before leaving. "When the wind stops," she said, "look only at the ground." I parked the van facing a stone wall, sealed the vents, and waited. At 5 p.m. the air went still. Not quiet. Still. No insects, no distant bleating, no sound of shifting sand. The pressure in the air changed, like being underwater. Then the compass on my dash twitched east. The VLF receiver emitted a low tone that buzzed in my teeth. I hit record. "Haroud, onset, local time approximately 1700 hours, I whispered. Atmospheric fluctuation increasing. Compass deviation sustained. Locals inside, outside. A strip of cloth on the nearest totem lifted horizontally, perfectly still, as if held out by an invisible hand. The radio began to hum. Then the hum formed syllables. My own voice played back through the static. "Haroud, onset. Local time approximately 1700 hours. It was identical. Same inflection, same breath between words. I stared at the mic in my hand, heart hammering. The storm wasn't just listening, it was repeating. By the third day I understood Haroud's rhythm, how the village only breathed at noon, how sound itself seemed to shrink when the sun tilted west. Each night I stayed inside the van facing the stone wall and listened to the static hum on my instruments. The recordings always started the same: faint wind, a pulse, then whispers that aligned perfectly with my own words from the day before. The storm was learning my voice. When the heat peaked, Youssef came to me with bread and a bottle of water. "The air is worse today," he said. "It has teeth." I showed him my data: EMF spikes, small but repeating, and the VLF receiver capturing a strange rhythmic tone, too regular to be random. He didn't need to look. "That's the mouth," he said, "where the old wind comes in." He led me to the edge of the village where the last line of totems stood. Beyond them, the dunes rippled like frozen waves. There, between two leaning markers, was a gap where several had been destroyed. The sand bore faint tire tracks, old, maybe years. "Foreign men came through here," Youssef said. "They broke the line. Since then, the watchers walk closer." "What are the watchers?" I asked. "The part of the storm that remembers," he said. "The wind that doesn't move." I planted a small array near the break, an EM sensor, barometer, and loop antenna. Hassan followed behind me, tying bits of mirror and black cloth to the stands as if blessing them. "Confusion," he muttered. "It forgets who it sees." At midday the readings were steady, but as soon as the sun began its slow drop, the air changed. The wind died and something deeper, like pressure, began to hum beneath the sand. The mirrors trembled. I called it a day and backed the van toward the square. That evening the village sank into silence even earlier. People bolted doors, covered mirrors, and lowered lamps. Amina caught me on the way in. "You still listen at night?" she asked. "Only the instruments," I said. "Then stop before they start speaking your name again." She hesitated, then added, "It doesn't know language. It knows sound. When it learns the shape of your breath, it comes closer." At 5:04, the static returned. My compass needle jerked a degree east, froze, then drifted back. I hit record. Haroud, onset conditions, compass deviation 1 degree, EMF rising. My voice came out steadier than I felt. The radio crackled once. Then from nowhere, a faint echo responded. Haroud, onset conditions. My exact cadence, a split second behind. I muted the feed and sat very still. Outside, the last light was dimming over the dunes, the kind of twilight that seems to hold its breath. A line of lightning flickered along the horizon, not above it but within it, horizontal, like a vein glowing through the sand. The sensors screamed. The EM spike maxed out, flatlining at the top of the scale. Then came the voice. Not through the speaker this time, through the air itself. A low vibration, not human but arranged like speech, repeating patterns in rhythm with my last sentence. Youssef burst from a doorway, shouting for me to shut it off. I killed the array and sealed the van. The sound stopped instantly, like someone had pressed pause on the sky. Inside, I caught my reflection in the rear window, my face lit by the faint red glow of the instruments. Behind me, for half a heartbeat, another outline flickered. My own shape, but slightly off, shoulders higher, head tilted toward the ceiling as if listening. Then it was gone. Later, when I replayed the recording, the interference formed a pattern. a sequence of short and long bursts, almost Morse. I translated the first few lines. They weren't random. Theta/return/limit/broken/name/mark. I shut the recorder off and stared out at the dunes. The wind wasn't moving, but the sand was shifting, rising and falling, like something large was breathing just beneath it. By dawn, the totems nearest the broken boundary were gone. Only smooth sand remained where they had stood. Youssef found me standing there and didn't look surprised. "It comes closer when it learns," he said quietly. "You've taught it too much." I wanted to argue, to tell him I was just measuring air. But the storm on the horizon pulsed once more, and the radio whispered my name again, this time without static. I didn't touch the instruments that morning. Every reading felt wrong, like data taken from a dream. The sand outside looked smooth, freshly pressed by invisible hands. Even the air had weight, heavy, charged, waiting. Youssef and Hassan were already at the boundary, rebuilding what the storm had stolen. The older man moved slowly, muttering a pattern of words that could have been prayer or memory. Each totem they raised leaned ever so slightly toward the dunes, as though bowing to something that couldn't be seen. I told them about the recording, about the message that spelled my name. Youssef listened, his face unreadable. "You gave it shape," he said. "Now it knows how to say you." He looked past me to the horizon, where a gray wall shimmered above the sand. "It has found its breath again." By midday, the temperature had dropped 20 degrees in under an hour. Clouds rolled in, not natural ones, but long horizontal bands stacked like shelves of smoke. Lightning flashed through them, but there was no thunder. I deployed my instruments one last time, setting the tripods at the edge of the village despite the warnings. I told myself I was there for science. The truth was I needed to know what was behind that sound that wore my voice. I connected the external microphones and let the VLF recorder run. Static filled my headset, followed by faint pulses that began to sync with my heartbeat. Then, music. Not melody, but rhythm. 3 long, 1 short, pause, repeating. It reminded me of breathing. At 3:40, Hassan shouted from the far end of the dune, "The mirrors!" I turned and saw every mirrored shard trembling in unison. Then, one by one, they began to rotate, turning to face the same point in the sky. The storm was forming above us, a single spiral of cloud twisting against the wind, moving too slow, too deliberate. It pulsed with flashes like veins beneath skin. Amina appeared beside me, eyes wide. "You must come inside." "I just need one more scan," I said, half to her, half to the machine. She grabbed my sleeve. "It remembers the ones who stand too long." The VLF recorder spiked violently, and I heard it again, the voice, clearer now, carried on the static. "Mark, return, limit broken." I ripped the headset off. "It's not interference," I said. "It's communication." Amina shook her head. "It's imitation. It takes what it hears. That's how it survives." The air around us shifted, heat bleeding away, replaced by something cold and metallic. The van's roof antenna began to hum. I turned toward the dunes, and for the first time I saw movement. Not wind, not sand. Shapes. Pale figures rising from the dust, tall and thin, their limbs unfurling like paper unfolding in reverse. They walked slowly, each step silent, their outlines flickering with the pulse of the storm. Their bodies weren't solid. They were made of what looked like static, caught in form, transparent but dense enough to bend light. The first one stopped a few yards from the nearest totem. It reached out a long, thin arm and brushed the mirror tied to it. The reflection twisted. The figure's hand passed through the glass like smoke, leaving it warped, as though the surface had learned a new shape. Hassan dropped to his knees, whispering. Amina pulled me back toward the van. The temperature plummeted. The air pressure slammed my eardrums flat. Lightning flickered again, horizontal, tracing the shape of the dunes, and for a split second I saw hundreds of them, standing in ranks like ghosts caught mid-step. Then the storm's wall dropped. A wall of sand rose without wind, towering stories high, rippling with flashes of blue-white light that crawled sideways like veins. My sensors erupted in a storm of data. Electromagnetic surges, pressure inversions, spikes that shattered calibration. The radio screamed white noise. I barely made it into the van before the first impact hit, a soundless tremor that rolled beneath the ground, lifting the vehicle a few inches off its suspension. I killed the exterior feed and locked the cabin. Outside, the storm swallowed the village. The world became static. Not the sound, the air itself. Every grain of sand, every wall, every surface vibrated with it. Through the windshield I could see flashes, faces in the lightning, some human, some too long, too narrow. They flickered in and out of shape like memories caught between channels. One of them looked exactly like me. It stood outside the windshield, hand pressed to the glass. The reflection didn't match my movements. It was a fraction behind, breathing when I wasn't. Then the radio crackled. Mark Ellison, recording active. The voice was mine, but older, slower, tired. You shouldn't have come. I shut my eyes, but the sound didn't stop. It came from the air, the instruments, the metal itself. You're still here, it said. You'll always be here. Then, as fast as it began, everything went silent. The sand settled. The storm drew back into the distance like a tide retreating from shore. The sky was pale, washed out, colorless. The village was half buried, mirrors shattered, totems broken again. The van's systems were fried, gauges flickering, battery drained. When I stepped outside, the world smelled burned, metallic, and faintly sweet. Hassan stood in the doorway of a half-collapsed house, staring at the dunes. It took its shape again, he said quietly. And it took something with it. I followed his gaze. Out on the horizon, the storm spun slowly, forming again, its center pulsing like a heartbeat. And in its flashes of lightning, I thought I saw a shape, my silhouette, standing still in the sand, facing me. It raised its hand, as if waving goodbye, or welcoming me closer. By the next morning, Haroud was half gone. The wind had filled alleys and doorways with sand, leaving only the tops of roofs and the jagged tips of totems breaking through the surface. The few villagers who remained worked silently, digging paths toward what used to be their homes. No one spoke of the night. I woke in the van with a film of grit on my tongue and the taste of ozone still clinging to the air. Every instrument was dead. The laptop wouldn't power on. Even my analog compass spun lazily, like it was drunk. The last entry on the recorder's display was time-stamped at 2:17:03. The log line read, Origin, internal. Destination, self. I stared at it for a long time, not sure if it was an error or a confession. Youssef appeared beside the van, face drawn, eyes bloodshot. You heard it, he said, not a question. It spoke, I told him. Whatever it is, it uses our voices. It records us. He nodded slowly. The storm remembers everything that touches it. Names, voices, shapes. That is why we hide during the night, why we do not speak. What happens when it remembers too much? I asked. He glanced toward the horizon where the wall of dust shimmered faintly in the distance, still alive. Then it becomes the one who remembers. It no longer needs us. I checked the van's camera feed, hoping for evidence, but every file was corrupted. Black frames, fragments of static, a few warped images that looked like faces pressed against glass. My face among them. Ria's voice broke through the handheld radio suddenly, faint and distorted. "Mark, this is Aeolus. Confirm transmission." I grabbed the mic. "I'm here." "The storm, it's real. You've had people here before, haven't you? What did they find?" Static. Then, "Return vehicle. Data recovery in progress." Followed by a second voice, mine, repeating it perfectly. "Return vehicle. Data recovery in progress." I froze. "Ria, that's not you." The line hissed, then a whisper, low, almost tender. "Mark, stay where the wind does not reach." It was Amina's voice this time, except she wasn't anywhere near the radio. When I looked up, she was standing by the old well in the square, hair loose, watching the sky. Her lips didn't move. The voice still came through the static, as clear as if she was standing beside me. The air temperature plummeted again. I stepped outside, the sand crunching like glass underfoot. The horizon was rising. The storm had returned. Not a rolling front, but a vertical column spiraling slowly upward, a tower of dust and lightning. It stretched miles into the sky. Inside it, shapes moved, faint outlines of people, animals, things that had once had form. The VLF receiver flickered to life on its own, the screen filled with characters that scrolled faster than I could read. Theta/persistence/limit reached/return record/origin mark. The phrase repeated endlessly until the display went white. The storm was calling itself by my name. The villagers began to chant low in their homes, muffled through the sand. Hassan hammered mirror shards into the ground around each doorframe, his hands shaking. "You need to leave," Youssef said, "before it learns how to keep you." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I could see it in the distance. The storm wasn't random. It was rotating around a single point, the sense's last coordinates, the epicenter of all my readings. "It's anchored," I said quietly, "and it's anchored to me." I climbed into the van and turned the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed, then caught. The fuel gauge read nearly empty. The nearest real town was 200 kilometers away. Still, it was movement. Youssef slammed a palm on the hood. "If you drive toward it, you will not come back." "Then maybe I'll learn why no one else did," I said, and shifted into gear. I drove straight into the desert. The road vanished within minutes. The storm grew ahead of me, swallowing the horizon, until it was all that existed. The wind howled, not chaotic, but rhythmic, matching my own breathing. Then the voices began to layer in. Fragments of my logs, Youssef's warnings, Amina's prayers, all woven into a single pulse of sound. Lightning licked across the sand in perfect horizontal lines. The air smelled like burnt copper. I hit record, though I knew the data would die with me. "Field report," I said into the mic. "Haroud anomaly escalating. Stationary electromagnetic storm exhibiting vocal mimicry and apparent cognitive persistence. If anyone hears this, the storm..." Static cut me off. The windshield fogged from the inside. Across it, words appeared, traced by unseen fingers. "Stay where the wind does not reach. Then the van lifted, not off the ground, just enough to feel weightless. The world outside slowed to syrup. The storm's interior was no longer dust but light, alive and pulsing like the inside of a lung. Shapes moved through it. Some wore my face. Others wore faces I didn't know. Men, women, blurred outlines. One reached out, pressed its hand to the van's glass. My sensors flickered back on long enough to register one final transmission. Origin, mark. / destination, self. I reached for the recorder, but the sound of my own voice filled the cabin first. Steady, calm, professional. Data capture complete. Atmospheric memory stable. Persistence achieved. Then the van dropped. When I opened my eyes, it was dawn. The storm was gone. The sky above me was pale and empty. The van was half buried in sand, the engine dead. My instruments were silent. The only sound was wind, ordinary, human wind. I stepped out and turned back toward Haroud. There was no village anymore, just dunes. Weeks later, a recovery team from Aeolus found the van. The data drive was intact, though no power remained. When they played the final log, it wasn't my last message they heard. It was my voice, still narrating readings, calmly describing weather conditions that didn't exist. The signal continued looping in perfect intervals, broadcasting on all frequencies. And somewhere out over the dunes of Morocco, when the air goes still and the horizon turns the color of old bone, the radios start to whisper again. Haroud, on set, local time approximated. The storm still remembers. And now, it knows my name. The recovery team said the van was empty when they found it, but they still hear my voice, broadcasting from somewhere deep in the dunes, repeating that same phrase again and again. Haroud, on set, local time approximated. Maybe the storm never stopped. Maybe it just learned how to hide in the air we breathe. If you ever find yourself driving through the desert and your radio starts to whisper back, turn it off. Don't answer. Don't speak your name. If you enjoyed tonight's story and want to help this channel keep bringing new horrors every week, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these tales alive. Let me know in the comments what you think the storm over Haroud really was, and if you'd still take that $200,000 job. Until next time, keep your radio off after dark and stay close to the fire.